because it allows them to be preserved. The court 106 is probably this court of the palms that we keep reading about in the texts. They might not have been live palm trees, they might have been stylized palm trees. But this courtyard is interesting in the sense that it was actually surrounded by a portico, a roof that ran around the inside of it that would protect a series of paintings. You can see some of the plastering here from this inner wall. Some of the paintings that would have run around it. And there's some post holes for what probably were temporary, not temporary structures, but wooden structures. I think we have a reconstruction here. Well, there'll be a reconstruction in a moment. Anyway, again, the paintings, the plastered paintings of this courtyard are quite incredible. If we take a look here, fragmentary again, but we see what are scenes probably of tribute bearers and items being brought maybe for sacrifice. We have two of these bowls that survive, one here, one here. These are the examples. You can see they've got this symbol, again, probably this crescent symbol relating to the god Sin. These might be bowls being brought for sacrifice before Sin. And this very, very large figure here, most likely an image of the king. And when we compare the dress of this figure, it's very different than that which we saw before. It's not the flounced skirts of around 2000 BC and the Ur III period. This is a very different sort of kilt which is tied in a very specific way, which is mirrored on the one example that we have of Shemshi-Adad from the Mardin stele. You can see here the same sort of skirt. So it's thought that perhaps this second set of paintings actually dates to the Amorite period, to the rule of Shemshi-Adad and his son, and that's when these paintings were put in place. But again, this is not very conclusive. This is just Mortgart's interpretation of it. In addition to these paintings, which would have gone around Courtyard 106, we have another painting which is known as the investiture scene of Zimri Lim. And this is quite an important piece for a number of reasons. And we'll look at it in a second. This is a reconstruction of the Court of the Palms, what it might have looked like. Again, with the frieze running around, those temporary structures, providing shade for people outside. And we're going to be looking right at the doorway. Right, this is this entryway right here coming into what will be a throne room. But right here, which is right here, there's a very interesting set of paintings, probably later paintings. Again, now we're looking at the entrance to the throne room. And it's this painting here that we're going to look at. And this is called the investiture scene of Zimri Lim. And I'm going to just jump forward here. Whoops. And you've seen enough of these now to break down this iconography. Zimri Lim, right, is now reeling, coming back into power, trying to secure himself. But again, we're seeing a lot of the same motifs we've seen over and over and over again. So you guys should be able to do this by now, by a long shot. What do you see in this scene, which is very different than a lot of scenes that we've seen before, right? This is we're looking at trees and people climbing them, and these wonderful hybrid animals again, sphinxes. So new elements, but also a number of very old elements as well. What are some things that jump out at you, that strike you as kind of being from the Sumerian canon?
Flowing water.
Bingo, right? Okay, yeah, so flowing water coming out of these vases, and not just flowing water, but fish coming out of them? Absolutely, right? From Gudea and earlier. What else do you see here? Yeah, definitely, right? We know we're dealing with these gods and goddesses because these horns are coming off of them. These interceding goddesses, who actually are, sort of dressed in this antiquated style, right? Whereas our individual here is wearing that new kind of kilt. More horns over here. What else are you seeing here? Yeah.
He's receiving, the king is kind of receiving like the rod and the ring or the robe.
Yeah, absolutely, right? There's that rod and ring of kingship being given to Zimri Lim. And yeah, so exactly, you guys got all the main ones. We see a very conspicuous use of earlier motifs that Zimri Lim is using to justify his rule. Again, he doesn't really need to justify himself. He's the rightful heir of Mari, but again, he's using the same motifs in a new way, with the addition of these really interesting things. Palm trees, right? Clear palm trees. We talked about the importance of date palms and the fact that they are sexed and linked to fertility. You need male and female date palms. They show up. But then also these very odd, plants that people have spent a long time trying to figure out what these plants are. It's not very clear. They're probably hybrid plants. Hybrid plants, just like hybrid animals. These the combination of many different elements into a new kind of plant, a new kind of animal, in order to express a complex idea. So we see that taking place here as well in the investiture scene of Zimri Lim. Actually, we find not only do we have these flowing water images, but actual statues of these flowing water goddesses. And what's wonderful about these is they're actually hollow. So the center of this statue is hollow and leads to this vase. Water would have been pumped through it, and this statue actually would have had water flowing out of the top of it. So really a lot of investing in this type of motif with this statue particularly. We have a number of statues from earlier leaders of Mari. For example, here's one of our early one, Ishtub Elam. And if you, just looking at the statue, if you had to guess who Ishtub Elam's contemporaries were, who would you say? Who does he look a lot like?
Gudea.
Yeah, he looks exactly like Gudea. With the hands and the headdress and everything like that, the arm. He is a contemporary of Gudea. Actually, the dates are on here. I forgot to mention that. But you can see these earlier kings of Mari, statues of them, were found in the central throne room, which we can see right here. One would have entered in, perhaps waited to be admitted to the central throne room of the king. We've got this raised podium, which perhaps could have been used by the king for certain ceremonies and receiving people. And again, we've made our way through this maze, this labyrinth of a palace, being led through corridor after corridor, finally to arrive here, and then perhaps be admitted to the inner throne room and see the king himself. And the throne is right here, with a series of storerooms and then bathrooms associated with the throne room as well. The throne room also has a series of steps that leads up to this room, room 66, which is where some of these statues were found. The statue of Ishtub Elam was found here. It's possible that this was a shrine set up to earlier kings. Also, it's been proposed that it was a shrine that commemorates Zimri Lim's retaking of the city, and that actually this investiture scene is really a painting of what would have been a series of sculptural reliefs up at the top of this series of stairs. Again, not quite clear, but we do know that these earlier statues were found in the throne room, with one exception. This guy, Puzar Ishtar, ends up being carted off to Babylon. The statue's from Mari, but was actually taken as a trophy when the city was sacked by Hammurabi, as we'll see. There's also a few other interesting things about this palace. The podium here, with these two staircases coming up to it, it's actually made out of mud brick that's encased in limestone, but it was painted to make it look like it was made of marble. So again, we see a palace that in many ways is very similar to those that we've seen at Brak, at Ashuna, at Tel Asmar, but on a level that is just absolutely massive and representative of the bureaucracy of the time, with over 2,500 or 25,000 tablets, and broken up into these different spaces. I just want to point out a few other things. We've got Zimri-Lim's his chambers up here in the far corner, and you can notice that the palace has these massive walls, these very, very thick walls surrounding what are the personal living quarters of the king. Why would you have these giant walls just around this corner of the palace? Any thoughts? What are you trying to defend against? Well, in the sense that we've got these inner walls and everything like that. These huge walls keep people from tunneling under. Again, this is a time in which we saw Lim killed by the servants of his own palace. So, in this sense, later kings, whether they're Yasma-Adad, whether they're Zimri-Lim, his son, are concerned with their safety even within their own cities. This is an urban palace. It's surrounded by other administrative buildings, and as a result, you're going to want these very thick walls surrounding this side of your palace so people aren't going to be able to tunnel under and pop out and kill you in your sleep. The rest of the palace, as you can see, also is defensive in the sense that it's so vast and so labyrinthine that by the time you've been admitted, and I'll just follow the course that we followed, into this courtyard, right, sneaking our way through these rooms, into the second courtyard of the Palms, and then finally finding our way to the throne room. By the time you're here, you're completely at the mercy of the king. You are not getting out of this place alive unless the king wants you to. So this is really a nexus of power, a very interesting development in palaces, and one that's just completely grandiose. We can really see why Zimri-Lim wanted to get this back. And he gets it back, right? He's able to get it back. Unfortunately, 20 years later, after getting it back, in 1760, another Amorite king to the south, a king named Hammurabi, who we'll talk about next time, sends his armies far to the north. And they end up attacking Mari. They end up burning this palace to the ground and looting it. In fact, in Hammurabi's annals, he says it takes 2 full years to fully loot this palace. It takes him 2 years to go through and take everything out of it and ship it all the way back to the south. And then he burned it down. So, so we'll talk about Hammurabi next time. Sorry?
No one stopped him?
Well, he was, let's jump back up here. I'll show you the old Babylonian Empire, right? And you can see this is actually the farthest extent north to the rule of Hammurabi as he establishes himself at Babylon. But yeah, I mean, he marched up with an army, and yeah, I mean, he wanted to bring Mari under control. We will see worse than this when we get to the Neo-Assyrian period. We will see entire cities being salted so things never grow again. This is what you do to your enemies in Mesopotamia. Just wait. It gets worse. I wanted to share one last thing with you, since we're talking about extispicy and these liver omens and things.